Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to episode 2 of Pain to Joy. My name is Danielle, and I would be remiss if I did not begin this episode with an immense amount of thankfulness from my entire heart to yours. Thank you for listening to episode 1. Thank you to those of you who let me know that you were going to listen to episode 1, and then you let me know once you did. Thank you for every note and email and phone call and voice note, encouraging me, supporting me, sharing feedback. I had mentioned in a post on Instagram and Facebook earlier this week that when I went to publish and release this podcast, I had no hesitations. I had no fear in the moment. I felt comfortable with what I was sharing. I shared from the heart. It was off the cuff. I went with the flow. It wasn't scripted. And all I hoped when I was about to press publish was that if people listened, they would let me know. And I have received that more times than I can count. And as I was saying to a friend of mine whose mom reached out, it really feels like a warm hug. Every time someone reaches out to share kind words of love and support, it just feels like the warmest hug. So I'd like to send a warm hug back to you. I'm going to place my hand on my heart and take a deep breath. This deep breath is thankfulness that I get to be here with you. Thankfulness to you for listening. And thank you to you for taking time out of your day to be here and to be present with me. So if you'd like to join me, I have now placed my left hand on my chest because my phone is in my other hand. This isn't a super fancy podcast yet. No microphone. And I'm going to take a deep breath in, a deep belly breath, and I'm going to inhale peace. And then I'm going to exhale all that no longer serves and perhaps never did. And I'm just going to leave at the door anything that doesn't serve, that is not welcome here in this space. And I invite you to do the same so that we can have this time of sharing. And hopefully, if you get a chance or if you'd like to share back to me, you can send me a direct message on Instagram at danielle.sutty, or you can email me at dksutty@yahoo.ca. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts or things you might be moving through. And in the meantime, I thought I would share something I'm still moving through. I feel a little bit like a fraud because I shared my first podcast on Monday, May 6th. It was early in the morning and I recorded it late the night before. So that was Sunday night. And at that point, every word that I said was true. I was sharing about how I had returned to my home, my condo in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and how some of my belongings have been mistreated, destroyed, wrecked. But the shift that I had was that if I know that things are happening for me, which I truly believe that life happens for us to learn from, to grow from, and these are just material things. I have my health, I have this roof over my head, I have a bed to sleep in, and I have, hot water, running water, clean water. Those are all the important things. But as the week went on, I kept finding more things that were broken, more things that were missing, and I would be lying if I said it wasn't stressful. And I had to stop at different moments and say, well, what are you actually stressed out about? And I can tell you what some of those things were. I was stressed, one, because the people didn't pay rent for the last month and a bit that they lived here. I haven't received the damage deposit back yet. I'm not sure how much of that I will see. So some of these stressors were money worries. And yet at the same time, I choose to believe in an abundant life. I like to live abundantly. I like to choose to live from love and not fear. And so I think this experience has forced me back into a way of being that is no longer familiar to me. And that is living from fear. And so that has been stressful. It's been stressful in that my intention wasn't actually to live back in my home. My intention was to continue to rent it out. However, I knew I needed to come back and see the damage that was done and rectify that, solve the problem, get things fixed. And that's going to take longer than I thought. Therefore, I will be living in my home for a bit in order to get things sorted. And what's funny about that is I had no intention of living back in my home. I wasn't sure that I would even live in Calgary. I was actually thinking of maybe staying in my motorhome that's out in the mountains near my family. I was thinking of staying there in the summer. I thought that might be a really fun adventure. Unfortunately, the engine is broken, so I wasn't going to be able to go anywhere. However, what I know to be true is I might not have chosen Calgary. I might not have chosen to come and stay back in my home, but I really feel like it's choosing me. So I feel like Calgary, the energy of my home, whatever it may be, is choosing for me to be here, to stay here, to figure this out. And obviously I'm choosing that as well because this is my home. And as a cousin of mine, beautiful friend, mentioned when I was saying, well, it's just things, but I have been stressed out about it and I really trying my best. And she said, yes, they're just things, but you created this sacred space. And I think when she said those words, it really hit home because I had created a sacred space. I had created this office that I turned into the beach retreat wellness room where there was a Murphy bed that friends and family could feel comfortable to stay. And it currently is not going to be in use. I had spent a lot of time and energy redesigning and buying beautiful things and making it a beautiful space. And I truly thought that the people who would end up living here would respect that space and by extension respect me. And so I will also explain some of the challenges that has come along with that this week. When I recorded the podcast on Sunday evening, I had not yet spoken with my parents. And I will say my parents have been incredible. They have both shown up in ways where they really want to help. They really want to help me get my money back and or get to the bottom of things. My dad has written a list of questions and emails and really he came into town this week to help me. Well, one of the toilets is missing a toilet lid. One of the sinks, something was broken and leaking I didn't know about. So he came in to help me with these things, to help fix these things. And at the same time, as much as I completely appreciate the energy of wanting to help, I also recognize this energy of going to war, like us against them. And so I'd written a couple of things this week as well that I shared online about how when things happen in our lives, when we feel like we've been disrespected, sometimes we automatically go to us against them and these people are monsters. And something that I've come to in the last few days, and this has been helped by conversation with couple of close friends, as well as an amazing acupuncture doctor here in Calgary, Don Wensrich. He's at Renewal here in Calgary. Incredible man. His nickname is the Wizard. And I'm so thankful I went back yesterday morning to see him. And just to back it up a bit, the reason I did that was because the day my dad was here helping me, being wonderful, we had some conversations around how I ended up getting here, how these guys ended up living in my place, what are some things that maybe the property management company could have done better. But these conversations, as much as we were trying to have calm conversations, it's just been quite stressful for me. And so going back to, well, why is it stressful? When I went to acupuncture yesterday morning, I was able to have a conversation with Don, the acupuncturist, about it. And he helped me heal for years after the car accident that I was in back in 2010. I was in a court case from 2011 until 2019. And yesterday, I was able to figure out what has been actually bothering me about all of this. And part of it is that I am currently in a situation where I will most likely need to make a claim through my insurance. And in doing so, then my insurance will probably go up. No, not probably, it will go up if I make a claim and the claim goes through. And there are people that, quote unquote, didn't do what was right? When you sign a contract, you are to pay the rent. When you're living in someone else's space and you sign a lease, that's what's expected. There's also an expected level of care for someone's belongings when you rent a furnished space. And so I could not appreciate more the amount of fierce loyalty and support that I have received from family and friends and so many of you. And at the same time, that energy has completely worn me out. And I know a little bit more why now. I still need to move through it and I still need to process it. But yesterday when I was at acupuncture, when I was lying there with the needles in, explaining to Dawn some of the situation, he was asking me, well, how do you feel when you think about some of this? And for me, there's like this direct link between having to make an insurance claim, having to quote unquote go after these guys one way or another to try and get some more money out of them, especially if my claim is not successful, because many things are wrecked. I would gauge potentially like $6,000+ worth of damage, plus the fact that I didn't receive one of the month's rent, et cetera, et cetera. But there's this energy around it that feels like some sort of battle energy, it's just a yucky energy. And that energy on Wednesday, when my dad was here and we were having a conversation, tried to shake it off, took some deep breaths. I said, okay, can we not just take a beat? And I started to ask questions to him, and I mentioned this yesterday in acupuncture, which is these guys who did wreck a lot of my stuff. I'm spending time this week in given moments being upset and being stressed out about it. Why? Because they're my things. This is my space. It's taking energy to fix them, to get them fixed, to move through the insurance. So this is taking time and energy from me. And some of that energy is like, how do I say it without saying bad words? This is the best I can do. So screw these guys who have mucked me over and, are causing me all of this pain and aggravation, and I have to do all these things because of them. And yeah, that's true. I've had to make phone calls. I've had to do different things. That is true. I have to decide whether or not I will move through with insurance. I have to decide how to move forward with the property management company. I have to get information and see how I will proceed. But what I know to be true is, in this moment, and I'm going to guess in every single moment in the last week, the two people who lived here did not once think about me. And what I also believe to be true is that when they were in my home, in my beautiful space, wrecking things over time, breaking things, maybe on purpose, maybe it was on purpose, or maybe it was accidentally, I genuinely don't think they were thinking about me. I don't think they had malicious intent. And one might say, yeah, but they wrecked your stuff, and that's not okay, and that's disrespectful, and it's wrong. I don't disagree. But what I disagree with is that now if I choose to move forward with different insurance or legal proceedings, I'm the one that has to expend the energy. I'm the one that potentially could be stressed out over time because of this. And when my dad was here on Wednesday, he left to go to Costco and to go find a toilet lid and a few other things. And a little while after he left, I had an episode that I have not had in a long time, which basically the stress, probably over the few days prior and having conversations about all of this, I felt like I was going to pass out. My neck muscles got really tight, and they had been tight prior to, seized up. I could barely breathe. So my question is it really worth it for me to move forward with any of this stuff if it's going to cause me more stress, and if my priority is to be taking care of myself and to take care of my health? Is this really worth it? And thankfully, because I had a visit with Dawn Wensrich yesterday at acupuncture, I know that I will be able to move forward, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, and move through the insurance, etc. Keep asking questions, get some more answers from the property management company. I will do that, but only once I am able to detach myself from the emotion. So for example, this week when I was like, well, what are you actually upset about? Well, it is upsetting that I spent time and energy to decorate my home, to buy nice things, to have them installed, to pay more money than I'd ever paid for a piece of furniture in my life between the Murphy bed and the couch. It is upsetting that now you might not get that money back, for example. It is upsetting that I don't feel relaxed in my home because every time I see my couch, it looks like crap. So I know that I will move forward with different proceedings, but only once and when I have done the inner work to move through and really release what underneath is truly upsetting me about all of this. And what Dawn, my acupuncturist, was able to help me uncover yesterday as I was lying there with the needles in, he's listening and asking really wonderful questions. What does make me sad when I think about having to potentially move forward with insurance or legal proceedings is that it flashes me back to a court case that I was in for many, many years after the car accident in 2010 and a minor accident in 2015 that just sort of put me over the edge. And so there's an opportunity here. The opportunity is for me to uncover what truly is upsetting and continue to heal things that I probably never healed. And so as much as this week there has been stress that has been uncomfortable and unpleasant, it has allowed me to uncover the fact that there are things that I haven't healed from the court proceedings, from the car accident. And we will dig deep another time. I realize I have so many things to say, but what I will tell you is that yesterday when I was lying there and Dawn said, well, how do you feel when you think about this? And I said, I feel sad. And as we uncovered it a bit more deeply, what I realized and acknowledged was, I feel sad because when I went through years and years of, I can't remember what it's called, but the court proceedings, litigation, etc., it was just a very yucky energy. It's a very us against them energy. And because in the original accident, the young lady who hit the car that I was in, she was driving and she was from British Columbia and she only had $200,000 worth of insurance. Therefore, once that money ran out, something called subrogation happened, where then my own insurance company was going to have to fork over money. And so even though it was my own insurance company, they were in fact against me. And this reminds me that at some point in my life, I would love to change the way the system is. In Alberta, in Canada, the system is very much, you have been in an accident, you document everything, the treatment that you've had, all of your symptoms, and then over time, if they don't improve, then you end up going through psychological testing and physical testing, because there has to be this sort of concrete proof about how much ability you've lost because of the accident and how much cognitive ability you've lost because of the accident. And every time, in my case anyway, I went through this testing, it made my symptoms worse. It made me feel worse. And something that I'm learning and is also very glaring to me in this moment is that through the court case, I learned that your best changes over time. I'm someone who grew up thinking that I needed to give 110% at all times, no matter what. Doing your best means you give 110%, you give 110%. And when I would go to this testing, the psychological testing would be 2-3 days, sometimes in a row. Sometimes it'd give you a Monday, Tuesday, and you'd come back Friday. And by Friday, I would be so exhausted, but I would think, well, I have to give 110%. Because if I don't give 110%, they think that you are malingering, I think is the word. And they think that you're not trying hard enough and therefore you're just trying to get money. Whereas in my situation, I mean, that was not the case. And the reason that applies today is that I have been trying to record this podcast, knowing that this weekend I will be with my family. I'm not sure if I will be able to find anywhere quiet enough to record. I don't know if I'll have the energy because I will be with family. And because these last few days, even though I've done my best to meditate, to take breaks from the stressfulness, turning a corner every few hours or so and finding something broken or missing and adding it to my list has been stressful. And therefore, my best is not maybe what it was last Sunday night. And even last Sunday night, when I recorded the first podcast, I'd come off of hours and hours and hours of sleep after a really intense migraine. Today, I am coming off of an episode of intense stress on Wednesday. It is now Friday, and I'm having a hard time remembering what I said. I'm having to pause and go back. I'm wanting to make sure that things make sense. But the gift, and there were many, the gifts of going through years and years and years and years of this court case, one of them is learning that our best changes day to day. And what had happened was, by the end of the court case, I believe the final physical testing I had was in early 2019. And the case finally settled July 4th, 2019, which, although I'm Canadian, I thought was great because it was American Independence Day. And I felt like freedom was mine after that on some level, because when you do get in a car accident and you are moving through this litigation, you can be constantly surveilled. Everything that you do and say is held against you, which again is why right now dealing with these 2 evicted tenants doesn't feel fun to me, because I never wanted to enter into insurance proceedings again. I never wanted to have to move forward with any legal action ever again, because of how uncomfortable it can feel when you are constantly being scrutinized. And so what had happened on that last time I had physical testing in early 2019, I had finally learned by then that doing my best didn't mean giving 110% like I had grown up doing. It meant giving 110% of whatever percent I had in me. And I think at that time, maybe I had 30% in me, and I learned to give 110% of that 30%. Because many, many times when I would have testing, I would push so that it didn't look like I was faking it, so that it didn't look like I was just making it all up, which I of course wasn't. But I pushed myself to the point where after testing, I would sometimes have weeks or months of pain flares and migraines because I pushed myself so hard. And even in that last session, I think it came up that maybe I hadn't pushed myself hard enough. And thank goodness I had an amazing legal team who said, no, Danielle gave the best she could, knowing how many times her life went back to lying in bed, staring out the window at the world outside, because she pushed herself too hard in the testing in order to prove to these other people that my symptoms were in fact real. And I share all of this because today, as I am doing my best to record, I am having a difficult time. I'm doing the best that I can in this moment, but it has included many pauses. It has included a couple of tears, because I'll pause and I have no memory of what I said a few minutes ago. So this might be the worst podcast you ever hear. It may be very incoherent, but in order to stay in integrity with myself, because I have committed to myself to be sure to release this podcast early Monday morning, this is the time that I have to do it, and I'm going to do it. And something that came up in an earlier recording today was this idea of building self-trust within ourselves. And so when we tell ourselves we're going to do something, like, I'm going to go to the gym today, and then we don't go to the gym. And we tell ourselves, okay, but I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow, and we don't go to the gym. We are betraying ourselves. And what I've learned over time is how to build trust within myself. I've always been a very trustworthy person. I trust others. Others can trust me. If you asked me, if you were my friend or an acquaintance or someone I love, and you asked me for help, or you asked me to do something and show up for you, I absolutely would. But part of my journey, and a question I would have for you, is why is it so difficult to show up for ourselves? Now, many of us may have grown up as people pleasers. I consider myself a recovering people pleaser, but this idea of getting the good grades, or, our parents might have been pleased by that, or other people in our lives, our teachers who we looked up to. Wow, you got another A, you got, 95%, great job. Oh, this time you got 98%. So many of us who had the best intentioned, most wonderful parents in the world, incredible teachers, started to base our worth on external validation, on the celebration of how good our marks were, how well our performance was at dance, how many goals did we get, when in fact, as much as those are wonderful things, maybe they are a demonstration of our skills and how much we've practiced a sport or dance, or how many times we practiced a dictée. I was in French immersion and I loved a dictée, so a dictation, I would write it out and read it and write it out and read it. I would record it on a cassette tape and listen, and I would get 100% on dictées in elementary school, in junior high, even at university. I think I would get 110%, and I loved a good dictée, but that was just me training myself over and over and over and over and over again. But that has nothing to do with my intrinsic value as a human being. It's amazing that we develop skills. We look up to other people who maybe have skills that we don't have, or who have honed skills over time. So I think it's only natural that many of us began to base our worth or self-worth on how well a performance was received or the accolades that we received, rather than learning that we are human beings, not human doings. So maybe you are great at baseball or ringette or lacrosse, you're an incredible public speaker, you're the best CEO ever. Those are wonderful things. But who are you as a human being? And know that you have value just for being a human being, not because you accomplished anything today, not because you did all the tasks on the list that you said you would do. You have value, you are loved, you are worthy just by being. And I think growing up in Western society, many of us did not learn that. I know for me, when I was no longer able to do my job as a high school teacher after the fall of 2015, for a couple of years, I didn't feel like myself. I was lost. I didn't know who I was. All I desperately wanted to do was get back to work. Prior to that, that's all I wanted to do. After I would have severe flares, after it was clear I probably shouldn't have been continuing to try to get back to work, but I thought that's what you do. I had built so much of who I was on, I am a teacher. That's who I am. And something I loved when I was learning the Italian language, and still am, was this idea that in Italian, you can say, faccio la professoressa. I do teach, faccio is the verb fare, to do. So instead of being, I am a teacher, it's faccio. That's something that I do. And I loved that distinction, because when you say I am a scientist, I am this, you automatically, with the language that you're using, attach to that. And it just becomes so intrinsic in who you are, and you don't even know who you are without it. I mean, a lot of people get extremely depressed when they retire for a variety of reasons, but one of those reasons is they have no idea who they are and who they would be without their work, without their job. I understand that work is very important. I understand that we need jobs to pay the bills and especially buy food right now, because that's pretty expensive. But there is something in knowing who we are and knowing that without whatever job it is that we've chosen or that we've maybe fallen into or that we love to do, that we are worthy even if we can't do it. And that took me a really long time to learn, because for a few years after I had had some testing for the court case, and I had been in a minor accident prior to that, and I spent a long time sleeping and in bed 20 hours a day for quite a long time. It was extremely challenging, and all I wanted was to get back to work as a teacher. That's all I wanted. But my life only started to move forward when I finally realized that I needed to grieve how much the accident had affected me. I needed to grieve the loss of not being able to be a teacher, because that was a love of my life, a huge passion for me. I loved teaching languages. I loved being with young people every day. I loved my colleagues. I loved being able to share my love of travel and food and storytelling with my students. It was just a joy of my life. And so for a couple of years after I was no longer able to work anymore, I was sleeping, I was trying to recover, going to physio. It was a very challenging time. I didn't spend a ton of time with my family and friends because that was also challenging. I have a healing brain, and so being around others at times, loud noises, etc., family gatherings, birthday parties was quite challenging. You could often find me in the back of someone's house, lying in the dark on the floor in a bathroom, just trying to gain some quiet and some dark and some respite for my brain to try and calm down my central nervous system. But finally, in the fall of 2017, a friend named Chris, he invited me to an information session on something called Landmark. And so it was the Landmark Forum. And you may or may not be familiar, and I don't think I'll do a deep dive into that today. I'm just very thankful that Chris invited me. The session was walking distance from my house, like less than 8 minutes, a house nearby, this beautiful family who shared their experiences with Landmark. And I was able to go to Vancouver, and it was a 3-day seminar where I finally started to recognize, realize, and acknowledge that this accident had drastically changed my life. That although I am alive and I'm so thankful to be alive, but I finally began to grieve the life that I had before. And I finally began to express that grief. I mean, I went to the Landmark Forum and I sobbed for, I'd say, most of those 3 days. There's photos of me that I've taken where I'm just sobbing, but I came out the other side a different version of myself, someone who acknowledged that she needed to grieve, that the life she had before was no longer. I needed to grieve that I was no longer a high school teacher and that I may never be a high school teacher again. And most of the time since then, because I've grieved that, I'm okay with that, but saying it out loud now, there's still a sadness to it. And I am eternally grateful that I was able to attend Landmark and have this breakthrough. And then when I returned back to Calgary, I was working with an incredible physio who works with people more like brain rehab, which is something I needed. And she was incredible. And she recommended something that I would recommend to anyone who feels stuck in their life. I would recommend this to anyone who maybe is feeling numb or feeling like they're in a place of, where have I come from? Where am I going? Who am I? And that is something that she shared with me called grief journaling. This also completely changed my life. And I share this today because these were the stepping stones that broke me open, because until I began to grieve the life that I had had that was no longer, the relationships that it affected, the job that I no longer have, until I began to grieve, I don't think I could have ever moved forward. Because I had broken myself open at Landmark to start feeling more emotions, I was probably also in a place in my life where I was finally able to feel, because although I had had pain for many years, persistent pain every day, very intense pain often, I was finally in a space where I was okay to also feel emotional pain. So there's times where we might think, gosh, why wasn't I able to do this before? Or why couldn't I heal this before? But what I've learned is you weren't ready. You weren't ready because, for example, I was in so much physical pain that there was no way I could even begin to address the emotional pain, or even begin to scratch the surface on the grief and all that lay underneath. Because I ended up going to Landmark, I shared that with Debbie, and then Debbie recommended this grief journaling. Rather than let grief take over, which it can, and sometimes I think it's okay to let it, but this grief was becoming consuming because I was just so overwhelmed with the sadness, and just sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, yeah, wow, my life has drastically changed. I went from this vibrant, passionate somebody who got to spend time with students every day and colleagues every day and go out at night and exercise and go to the swimming pool and go for walks and do my workouts and go to hot yoga, to going to work, sleeping all afternoon because I was working in the morning, eat, do work, go back to sleep. So it was like eat, work, sleep, eat, work, sleep, eat, work, sleep. That's all I was doing. And thankfully, after being broken open, I began grief journaling every morning. So you pick a time of day, you get yourself a nice new journal. So you get a nice new journal, nothing else is in it, and that's going to be your grief journal. And I know that people love technology, but I would invite you to get a pen and a book. So this is my journal here. And every day at the same time, you find a spot in your home. Maybe it's a comfy chair, maybe it's the couch, maybe you're sitting in bed, but it is a place where you will not be disturbed. You can set a timer for 15 minutes. Maybe you don't need 15, but you set this timer and you journal anything and everything you might be feeling around this grief. Now, people sometimes think that grief is only when you lose someone in your life, and that can be devastating. But we can grieve the loss of the life we thought we were going to have. We can grieve the loss of a job. We can grieve the loss of a pet. There's just a lot of things that we can grieve. And I also feel the world would be a better place if we spoke more about our grief. But we're starting. That's what we're doing today. So you have your journal, you have your pen, you pick a time and a spot, same time every day. You set the timer for 15 minutes. And once you have written everything that you've written and cried whatever tears you want to cry and whatever grief that's come up has come up, you put it away. You put it away for the rest of your day. And whenever thoughts of grief come up and feelings come up, you say, nope, you've already had your time. Now that might sound like you're not allowing yourself to feel your feelings. This is something you do when the grief is consuming you. This is something you do when the grief is so heavy that you know that you're stuck in life and you've started to uncover this grief, but you need to have somewhere to put it. So I had Post-it notes in my car, Post-it notes all over my house that said, you've already grieved, you've already had your time. So I allowed myself to have this intense time of grief, and then I could go about my day and start to experience pockets of joy, true joy. And also what I've learned is when you allow yourself, when you're ready, you might not be ready and that's okay, but once you're ready to feel more intense emotions, this grief, this sadness, this truth of what your life was and what it is now, for example, or someone that you've lost and how painful that is. When you allow yourself to feel those deep, intense, sad, painful emotions, you then are opening yourself up to feeling more intense joy, more intense happiness. You might have lower lows, but you get to have higher highs. And I feel like life is a lot more colorful since I allowed myself to go there, since I allowed myself to grieve. And I did this, I think for months. I'll have to look back in my journals, but I'm pretty sure I did this for months. And then there gets to a point where you kind of don't need to do it every day anymore. You might still break out your journal every morning and do your normal journaling, but I didn't, over maybe 2-3 months, I didn't need it anymore because I gave myself that time and space. It was like I'm honoring my grief in that time. I'm honoring myself. I am building trust in myself to know that I'm going to be here for me and I am going to be here for this grief and I am going to get through it with me, for me, and I did. And then, like I said, more pockets of joy opened up. I could breathe a little more deeply. I could live a little more freely. And so that's something that I would invite you to do if you are grieving someone or something. If you feel like even in listening to this podcast, something has opened up for you. I also highly recommend at all times therapy, a therapist. I know that that can get expensive, especially if we don't have coverage. But I do know that there's things like betterhelp.com, and sometimes there's like employee family assistance programs where you can get a few sessions that are on the house or that are going to be discounted. But I definitely encourage you to speak to someone in a safe space. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a counselor, therapist, psychologist. but grief journaling changed my life, and I truly believe that it could change your life if that's something that you feel that you need. But that is definitely a breakthrough point for me between landmark and acknowledging that I even had things to grieve, and I started to open myself up to more of the intense, sad emotions and acknowledge how much my life had changed. And then thanks to Debbie, I was able to continue grieving, but in a finite space over time. And that really changed my life. And so that's a tool that I want to share with you today that could be helpful in your life, or a tool that you could share with somebody else that you know. And if you have more questions about it, please email me at dksuddy@yahoo.ca or DM me on Instagram, danielle.suddy, or Danielle Suddy on Facebook. I'm on Messenger there. And what I love about this grief journaling tool is that it's something that you can use for the rest of your life, because what I've learned and what I've been learning is that even though we can grieve and even though we can honor our grief in different ways, grief can still pop up at the strangest of times. Grief can pop up when we least expect it, and when it starts to become stronger in its waves, we can reinstate the grief journaling for whatever we need it for, and it can really be a fabulous tool. I wanted to thank you for spending time with me today. I wanted to share a joy before I close today's podcast. I am so thrilled that I got to reconnect with one of my closest friends this week. It is so wonderful to be with the people that I love in the real, as my niece says, so in real life, and just laugh and share, sometimes start stories, sometimes not even finish the story, and just have a really beautiful connected time. And I also look forward to more joyful connected times this weekend, celebrating my nephew's birthday, celebrating Mother's Day, spending time with my family, and also some friends who I haven't seen in a long time. I think I'm going to get to meet a little one that was born while I was away, so that is pretty darn exciting. And I'm curious what you might be looking forward to. I love hearing about other people's joys. I love hearing about your challenges and your wins. And I think for me, a win right now is that I shared a lot of challenges, that I've shared a lot of experiences, and that I got through this podcast. We did it. I did it. And I really believe in celebrating every victory like it is the Super Bowl or the World Cup. Whatever your Super Bowl is, may you celebrate yourself. May you celebrate your wins. May you stay in integrity with yourself and with your word, and continue to build self-trust. So when you say you're going to do something, do it. Do it for you. Do it for yourself. Show up for yourself, because that is a very high form of self-love and self-care. And hey, if you don't do it or you can't do it, extend the same grace and love and compassion to yourself that you would extend to a love, a best friend, and just treat yourself with as much kindness as possible. That is my wish for you. That is my wish for me and for all of us. May we move forward with kindness as we start this new week. May we celebrate every win, because we are amazing and we are worth it. And I am just sending you loads of love, hand on my heart, deep breath in, exhaling all that no longer serves and perhaps never did. Thank you from my whole heart for being here today. It is an honor and a thrill. I appreciate you, and I am sending you love.